Good morning, everybody. How are you? Everybody knows in this room that I think, how many of you have heard me speak before? I've heard me speak before. How about this? So you know that I like to walk around and pick on you, so I'm going to do that today too. And today we're going to talk about 5 things that every realtor should know about litigation. Yeah, not those things, the other things. Okay, so, you know, I think it's probably safe to say that nobody in this room really wants to know something about a lawsuit, right? But, you know, despite that, there are things that you really ought to know, because there's really no advantage to ignorance, right? And so forewarned is forearmed. In addition, you're going to do your job much better if you understand some basic things about litigation, and you're going to protect yourself and enable yourself to stay in this business longer and more happily. So let's start with some lawyer stuff. First, I'm going to remind you that I'm not going to be giving anybody any legal advice today, that I'm not going to be giving anybody tax advice, and that we're not forming any attorney-client relationship, although a lot of you in this room are already my clients. So let's start now with the 5 things that you should know. The first thing that we're going to talk about is that you should get help early. And so let's talk to the managers in the room. So let's talk with, how about Caesar? Wake up, Caesar. So Caesar, when I say that you should get help early, we're talking about the 5 things you should know about litigation, what comes to mind for you?
Consult with somebody that knows before you get into the swimming pool.
Okay, consult with somebody who knows, and that somebody might be your, starts with an M, manager, right? Because he's just a manager, he should know that automatically. Congratulations, Caesar, you get a flashlight back. There you go. Fine. Okay. Lee Lieberg, what does it mean to you, get help early?
Get help early?
Yeah, I don't mean like Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I mean, you know, when there's potentially a lawsuit that's going to happen around you, what does it mean to get help early?
Well, I would think that the manager would then decide where to take it next.
Okay, that was Caesar's answer. What about your answer, Lee? I want and show your work.
The manager needs to get legal counsel. Then I would call the hotline.
Okay, that's good advice. Bob Bodkin, you're a manager too. You would call his hotline, in fact.
I call CAR's hotline, and after calling them,
call CAR hotline. That's a very good, very good piece of advice. Both of you guys get.
All right.
And James Pye, you're a manager. What do you say? What does it mean to you when we talk about getting it help, advice, support early?
Get all the documentation together first.
Get all the documentation together first. Okay, good. That's good preparation. Excellent. Anything else? David, what do you say?
I would call you first.
David, that goes without saying. Given. Okay, great. Well, those are all very good things. So yeah, you do want to talk to your manager, okay? And one of the things, though, that I wanted to, and actually this is a slightly earlier version of this program, one of the things I want to differentiate first is a basic question when litigation is happening or potentially litigation is going to happen around you, and that is, are you in the line of fire? Okay? Now, let me tell you sort of what happens typically. I have about 20 minutes this morning, is that right, Andy? I just want to make sure I don't overstay my welcome, which I do a lot of. You know, a lot of the time what happens is your client calls you and says, hey, we closed escrow last week. I just found out that the sewer line needs to be rebuilt. Okay, or something like that. There's something wrong with the air conditioning system. It might be not be a very expensive item, but it might be more money than somebody's just going to laugh off. You know, I mean, if you close escrow on the house and you move in and you see that there's a crack in the tile on the kitchen floor, you might go, you know, I didn't see that. There was an area rug in the way. Okay, that's not that big a deal. But if you find out that, again, using the sewer line example, that there's a main sewer line failure and that the whole line has to be replaced, it's going to cost $100,000, you probably won't laugh that off. So when that problem tends to arise, it's not immediately clear that anybody's going to blame you. but it does sort of lurk in the background. So what I wanted to say about this talk in the first place is that you want to be able to distinguish between when there may be an allegation that something about that you did that may have contributed to the problem, or if it's strictly between the parties. And that's a very difficult call. But because of that, you want to take the precaution to sort of assume that you may get drawn into something at some point. Hopefully not, and we're going to talk about trying to avoid that today. But you can't assume that you will not be drawn in. So this is a very serious part of this talk, and it leads to the discussion of whether or not you have to contact your errors and omissions carrier. Okay? A lot of errors and omissions policies are malpractice insurance. Okay, the policy that I believe most of you pay. Nowadays, you still pay like transaction by transaction for a fee for that insurance coverage. Is that how it works? So there's usually a general policy also, right? So a lot of the time, what your carrier says is that if you do not give notice of the first notice of the claim, it could serve to undermine or discharge their obligation to defend you. Okay? So what it says is that if you did not tell the insurance company that there was a problem right away, the insurance company might say, we're not going to defend you. That's the first problem. The second problem might be that, let's say in November of 2016, your client sends you a letter or an email that says, hey, there's a problem that was in the garage that, I didn't know about, okay, and I'm really unhappy about it. And so you talk to them about it, you try to work that out, but months and months go by, and now about December of 2017, they make a demand for mediation, and they say, Nancy, we think that you need to be there too, because we're concerned about what went on here. At that point, more than a year has gone by, and many policies will say that you must submit the claim within the policy year. So if you had notice of the potential claim, and you didn't tell the carrier about it within the policy year, they could say, we're not going to defend you. And that's a very serious problem. Okay, I've had cases like that. I don't do insurance defense work, and there's a long explanation for why, but I have defended many realtors who were named in uninsured claims. And it's very unpleasant to pay that on your own. So don't blow your insurance coverage. Okay?
Thank you, Dave.
Exactly. Yeah. If you do, definitely don't call Mark Wu. Okay. So you want to go through all this. You want to talk to your manager. You want to make sure that your manager is also going to be working with your carrier to establish what the requirements are in order for you to be able to invoke your coverage. The carrier may still choose to defend you because the laws in California are very extensive in terms of requiring an insurance carrier to protect you. But they may do so under something called a reservation of rights, where they say, we're going to defend you for now, but later on we may change our minds and we may not pay a claim afterwards. It's still kind of scary stuff. Okay? You don't want to go through that alone. Okay? So, I did change this. This is an earlier generation of this. Okay, so number 2, stop it before it happens. Don't hide. Okay? You want to be proactive. And that really reflects the fact that you're being professional. This kind of problem doesn't have to be a disaster. The other advantage of being proactive and jumping into the potential conflict early is that it gives you the chance to monitor this still from the sidelines. You want to know what's going on. Is it something that's just going to sort of peter out and go away? Or is it something that's going to fester and soar and metastasize? Okay, it's funny, you just don't know. I see claims where people have, hundreds of thousands of dollars in claims against another party, against a seller. It's usually the buyer against the seller. And they just sort of lose interest in it after a while. And because of the statute of limitations, or the statute will require that party take action within a period of time. For fraud, it's within 3 years of discovery. For breach of contract, it's within 4 years. So sometimes what happens is that the party will just sort of lose interest in it. And in the meantime, you're watching the calendar and crossing your fingers. Okay? But by being involved with your client, staying in touch with them, you don't want to kind of blow on the ashes to try to get those coals to come up into a fire again. But you do want to be around. You don't want to hide. You don't want to disappear. And you want to know kind of where they are, what's happening, and whether or not they are intending to take further action. Okay? You also want to be there to help resolve the problem and try to diffuse it. Most problems are, thankfully, smaller. And so your clients have other recourse. They could sue the seller in small claims court. They could find a cheaper bid to try to remediate the problem. There are a lot of different things that can happen that just sort of take the wind out of the sails of somebody who thinks that they're going to file a lawsuit. And so by being around, not hiding, and being helpful, chances are it's going to help you to stay on the sidelines. In modern history, we've been looking at the Syria debacle and the problems going on there. And one of the concerns is that the United States tends to support the rebels and that Russia tends to support the Syrian regime. One of the problems is that both countries have boots on the ground. And what we don't want to see is that right now the United States and Russia are on the sidelines. But if we actually accidentally shoot each other, suddenly now we're in a shooting war basically against each other. And that's kind of serious. You are sort of in the same place. If the Syrian regime and the Syrian rebels are fighting it out, you want to stay on the sidelines. But there's always the possibility that you can get drawn into that conflict because you're just out there. You may have done nothing wrong, but you could get drawn into that lawsuit. So that's one of the reasons why you want to monitor what's going on. And very often lawyers will advise clients to name the real estate broker because at the outset you don't really know what happened. You don't know whether there was negligence by the real estate broker in terms of performing an investigation or disclosure, or whether even, in some cases, the real estate broker is in collusion with the seller, and the real estate broker has deliberately not disclosed a problem. I had a case once where my client, who's a young firefighter, and his wife, they purchased a home, and it was the sewer line case, where the sewer line had to be rebuilt. It was going to be $100,000 to rebuild the sewer line. The woman who sold the house knew about the problem. She had told her neighbors about it. That's how my clients learned about it. They moved into the house, and one of those nosy neighbors leans over the fence and goes, "So, are you going to get around to fixing that broken sewer line?" And they were like, "What broken sewer line?" And she says, "Oh yeah, this has been a problem for years. I was wondering when Sally was going to do anything about it, but I guess it's on you now." Turned out that the real estate broker knew about it too because they were close friends, and the real estate broker had been around, the neighbor had seen the real estate broker around, so the real estate broker was in on it as well. That's a crazy story, right? I mean, how often does that happen? but it does happen occasionally, and from the lawyer's perspective, they don't know where you are in that fact pattern yet. They don't know whether or not there was something you should have known, and so sometimes just as a precaution, they're going to name you. So the third thing you should know about real estate litigation is you really should know your agreement, okay? And so let me ask the room again. How many of you have some sense of what I'm talking about? Because most of us use the CAR forms, right? And the CAR forms are all structurally very similar. When you go from the RPA, the Residential Purchase Agreement, to the CPPA, the Commercial Property Purchase Agreement, to the RIPA, the Residential Income Purchase Agreement, they're all pretty much the same agreement with some modest tweaks. So in that agreement, what kinds of things can you think of that need to be done in order to be better prepared for litigation? Anybody? Helen?
Mediation and arbitration.
Mediation and arbitration. Very good, Helen. You get an A. You're smarter than a Lieber guy. Anybody else? Yep. Sibby, what do you say? You say, "I'm texting, leave me alone." Okay. Anybody else?
Terms and conditions.
Terms and conditions, okay. That's a good idea. It's moving in the direction of what I'm coming to. The inspection report? Physical inspection report. Okay, so I think you're all getting the right idea. What you want to know about, and I use the RPA here as the example, is that So what happens when there's a disagreement? Helen pointed out the mediation arbitration provisions. Does anybody know what the mediation provision is? Does everybody know what it is? Everybody who's not an affiliate know what it is? Okay. You should all know what it is, because otherwise your managers are not doing RPA training in the office. The mediation provision of the RPA says that in the event of a dispute, the party must first resort to mediation in order to try to resolve the dispute without actually filing a lawsuit. If that party files a lawsuit, that party, without first requesting mediation, that party will be barred from recovering attorney's fees in the event that that party were to recover attorney's fees in the dispute. There are some exceptions to that. The exceptions are filing a lis pendens in order to preserve your rights to enforce the purchase agreement, and small claims court. If you're going to make a small claims claim, you don't have to first seek mediation. Okay. Well, what's the significance of this? The significance of this is that in many cases, the attorney's fees will be the tail that wags the dog. Okay? You could have a $100,000 dispute, which is a lot of money, but you could have a $300,000 attorney's fees bill that's involved. Okay? I've had cases like that. I had one that was a strange one that involved 2 mortgage brokers. It's a very long story. If you drive down the 10 freeway right by the Eastland Mall, there's an octagon-shaped office building on the south side. You guys all see it's kind of wood and sort of modern-looking construction. Right, it's by the In-N-Out Burger and all that stuff. Okay. So the woman who bought that building was a mortgage broker. My client was a mortgage broker, was a tenant in that building. And when she bought the building, she took the doors off of his suite because she was trying to drive him out of the place. And so we sued her. It ended up that we only recovered $28,000 in damages, but we got a $250,000 attorney's fees award. Okay? So if you have blown the attorney's fees provision of the agreement, that becomes a significant negotiating factor downstream. Because what happens if you're defending, as an example, is that somebody says, well, so you're suing me for $50,000, right? That's right. Yeah, but you've blown the attorney's fees clause already. You're not going to recover your attorney's fees. How much are you planning to spend in order to get back your 50? But if I win, I haven't blown the attorney's fees clause. I'm going to recover all of mine. So this becomes a very important issue. Why is it important to you? It's not because you want to give any legal advice, because we know that you're not going to do that unless you're a licensed attorney. But you do want to know that you should advise your client, you need to review the mediation provisions of the RPA, and that you're obligated to seek mediation first. Okay, so that's something you want to be able to advise your client about. You want to know when the deadlines are for performance. You want to understand what arbitration means, which is basically the same as a trial, but in an informal setting. It usually involves a retired judge or an attorney to act as the judge in the case, but in that case, that person will be the arbitrator. It's private, and you have a lot more control over those proceedings as far as timing and so forth. It's a little bit more expensive to do, but in my experience these days, because of the delays in the court system, it's actually cheaper. So these are all things that you want to know about. You want to know about the notice provisions under the RPA, or any of the CAL agreements, the CAR agreements, because what you want to know what is effective notice given, who can take notice, which is the other agent, okay, and how it should be delivered. All those things are important for you to know, and they are part of the background of litigation. Okay. Number 4, always recommend counsel. All right, and that's not just because I'm trying to make money for me and all my friends. There's a reason for this. So yeah, this is definitely the wrong version of this presentation. Let me actually. So do you all have the handout? No. Okay, so I did send that along, and I have a copy of it here. Let me just refer to that. Okay. But what I'll do is, maybe while we're here today, Albert did. Yeah, that's the handout for all of you, which I thought you guys would do. But can you? Yeah, maybe they can print it off that, and I will use this for now to complete the talk. Okay, and then, so we can do it afterwards. I'll give it to you after. Okay. So, what are we talking about when we tell you to recommend counsel? the best practice for real estate brokers, of course, is that you're not supposed to give any legal advice, right? Unless, again, you're a licensed attorney. If you have recommended counsel, that indicates, number one, that you haven't given anybody any legal advice. Instead, you've told them to seek legal advice. And so what better evidence of that is written evidence that you've actually recommended to your client to seek legal advice. It helps you to improve your client's position. Remember, again, you don't want to do anything which would prejudice your client, hurt their position, and if you've recommended that they have counsel, and certainly if they've obtained counsel, you've helped to improve that position. You've also demonstrated that you have nothing to hide. Okay? And that's part of the idea that I was talking about earlier about staying involved and being involved in the dispute, we'll call it for now. Okay? Because if you have nothing to hide, you've done your job, you've been professional, then you welcome your client to obtain legal advice, to advise that client through the issue. Okay? What I wanted to say, and I actually have modified this PowerPoint, I apologize for, I think I provided them with the wrong version, but the number 4 thing actually was that I wanted you to also to remember to keep great records, okay? If you keep great records, you are much less likely to be a victim, you're much less likely to be seen as a target by a plaintiff's lawyer. It demonstrates the fact that you've done a good job, it demonstrates the fact that you're a professional, and it speaks volumes about you as a real estate broker. How many of you keep a telephone log or a transaction log in your transactions? Okay, so what do you put in that transaction log? I forgot your name now. What do you put in your transaction log? And you? Sorry? Conversations between your clients? Okay, good. How about when the contingency deadline is going to expire? Okay. How many of you get a written acknowledgement that the client understands that the contingency is going to expire and that they have agreed to remove contingencies? Okay, we have to do that through the active method anyway. How many of you have sent an email that said, you understand that by doing this, you're going to be waiving all your rights to complain about anything, you're going to agree to proceed with the transaction, and if you don't, you're going to lose your deposit. Okay? The more information, the more complete your records are, the more you are going to be impervious to attack. I'm in the middle of a trial right now. We're beating the daylights out of the realtor who sold a commercial property to my client. My client lost $1 million on it. They filed for bankruptcy because we're just thoroughly beating them. So, did you tell the buyer that he had the right to inspect the property? Of course I did. Did you do anything in writing? No. Okay. Did you give him the leases for the property? Of course I did. Do you have anything in writing that demonstrates you received the leases? No. Okay. Do you? How many times did you talk with him? I talk with him all the time. Do you have any records of those conversations? No. Did you send any confirming email to the client indicating that you talked about this or that? No. Absolutely nothing. The guy had no calendar, no receipt for documents, no telephone log, no transaction log, nothing. He did, however, have an email that he sent to the listing agent when he wrote the overpriced offer saying, I've submitted an overpriced offer. This justifies my request for a 3% co-op commission. Yeah, that was really stupid. So, if you've documented your file very well, that's also something that illustrates that you've done a good job and you've been a professional. And it's a subtle idea, but it's very, very important. Your file should be organized. It should be saved digitally as well as in hard copy. Okay? If you do a good job as you maintain the transaction, you will have it organized, indexed, with the separations kept in order, and that will help you to, again, defend against an attack later. Okay? So the 5th thing is that most cases will settle. And generally, 95% of cases settle. Most cases go away for one reason or another. So what you want to remember about that is it's a long process. Okay? It's not something to be very concerned about, but you can't be stubborn and you can't be inflexible. And you should recommend that for your client as well, as long as you are sort of on the sidelines talking with them about it. It's important for no one to be intractable in litigation. It's, a case is funny. I was saying in this outline that it's a little bit like war. Okay, and that actual litigation is a civilized way to have a dispute. We used to go out and beat each other up with swords. But nowadays, the courts give us the opportunity to resolve our disputes instead in a civilized environment, theoretically. But like in war, sometimes fortunes change. And sometimes you can start out winning a case and end up losing it. So it's very important to remember that and to stick with it and to try to resolve it at every opportunity you can. Okay? So I think that's the end of my time today. And so I thought I'd wrap it up with you again. I just want to remind you that you want to be able to get help early and stop the problem before it happens. You want to know your contract. You want to keep great records. You always want to recommend counsel. And that most cases will settle. So try to work them out. And if you do that, you'll be able to avoid a trial. Okay? Thank you very much. Any questions? Caesar.
David, we always talk about lawsuits and be very careful about the transactions that we get. There's close to 5 million transactions in the United States that involves residential real estate. There's about 500,000 in the state of California. How many, if there's 500,000 sales in the state of California, how many lawsuits are filed in real estate? Do you have that data?
First of all,
As a
Caesar,
percentage.
I hate math questions.
Okay.
I hate math questions. Actually, I don't. I will tell you that, as an example, this is a crazy number, in the Los Angeles Superior Court, the Central Courthouse, unlawful detainer proceedings, there are 16,000 a year.
Basta.
Okay? That's just in one courthouse. So there's a lot of that kind of action. In terms of general real estate cases, I honestly, I don't have a lot for you. Okay, but there's plenty, because I have 3 associate lawyers that work for me, so there are 4 of us, and we seem to be pretty busy. So if my little corner of the universe says that we're that busy, then everybody else is probably busy too. Anybody else?
David?
Well, thank you. Mark?
Can you reiterate the fact that, a lot of times we get clients, and I hear this in the industry, where people are upset because we're not defending the lawyer, the lawsuit, because of the fact that the legal costs are going to be exorbitant way amount. So can you again reiterate that process so that the members here can understand why it's advisable to do that, even though you might have a great case, but you talk about.
So, Mark, if I understand your question, you're saying that there are cases where the carrier elects to settle the case,
And
but the insured says, no, I want
upset.
to, because that says I did something wrong, and I'm right, and I want to be vindicated. And what the carrier should say, but they really can't, is, what actually they do is that if you require that we do that, we may not pay the claim. And so what Mark is saying is that sometimes people are indignant, they're mad, they're saying this claim is completely unjust, I didn't do anything wrong, why are you paying this claim? That just shows that I did something wrong. Well, 99.9% of the time in the settlement agreement, there will be a provision that says that neither party acknowledges wrongdoing, and that the case is being settled, for purposes of expediency or whatever it might be, okay, in light of the perils of litigation. So you're really not admitting that you did anything wrong if the case is settled. I'm in the business of filing lawsuits, you're not in the business of being in a lawsuit. If you are in the unfortunate situation of having to defend a lawsuit, you should never object to the carrier being ready to settle it. That's actually part of the problem, is when you really want the carrier to settle it, but they won't. And there are very complex issues behind that, but you should never, ever object to the carrier settling the case. Okay? You don't like being sued, but you're not there because you elected to go through that process. You're there involuntarily. So don't drag it out by requiring the carrier to continue to defend. That's a little bit crazy. That's like saying, I enjoy surgery so much, I don't want it to end. Okay? So that's a good thing to think of, and if that issue ever arises, you're welcome to give me a call, and, as an aside, and I'll be happy to kind of walk you through it in terms of explaining why it is that you're absolutely crazy if you're choosing to sustain the litigation rather than settle the case. Thank you, Mike. Anybody else? Thank you very much.